We're diving deep here. We're going past the top 48 wide receivers. These are guys that are going to be at the very end of your roster. So when we're looking at end of roster guys, what do we want? Do we need to try to find that slot wide receiver that can guarantee you 11 points per game, that you can go through and you can plug and play him whenever? No, you don't need to be drafting last year's Cole Beasley. You need to be looking for someone that has real upside, someone that, hell, if things break right, they could be a top 24 guy and be a weekly starter for you, because at the end of the day, in your casual fantasy football league, in your redraft format, you're always going to be able to hit the waiver wire. You're always going to be able to go to waivers if one of these guys doesn't work out. So I'm trying to find that next big hit. I'm trying to find that next guy that's going to go from the wide receiver 5 on your roster to the wide receiver 2, the wide receiver 1. We want last year's Jalen Waddle, not last year's Cole Beasley. So before we dive into this, please, guys, if you have not already, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. If we hit 90,000 subscribers before the season starts, we will go ahead. We will get a 24-hour live stream draft marathon, which we already live stream drafts every single night, but 24 hours would be a little bit wild. Let's dive into our first guy. Let's go look at Garrett Wilson. Now with Garrett Wilson, it's crazy that he can even make it on this list. It's crazy that right now we're looking at an ADP that has Garrett Wilson sitting around wide receiver 51. Now I understand, yes, I need to admit, not a great situation you're looking at. Like the Jets offense, in my opinion, is going to be pretty pitiful. If we go through and if you look at Zach Wilson's rookie season from an adjusted yards per pass attempt, now I understand he got better as the year went on, as all rookie quarterbacks tend to do, but it puts him in a mark of quarterbacks that are significantly more likely to fail going forward rather than turn into the next Josh Allen, rather than, I don't even know if we've had someone hit outside the past 10 years that had an adjusted yards per pass attempt as low as Zach Wilson on the aggregate of his rookie season. So I am very worried about the passing efficiency here in New York. And at the same time, Elijah Moore looks like he's going to be the target leader in this offense. It looks like Garrett Wilson may potentially be the wide receiver 2 for the New York Jets. But at the same time, what are we looking for? We are looking for upside. We are looking for upside if something changes. And I think you have that here with Garrett Wilson. This is a wide receiver that if I head over to our 2022 fantasy football draft guide and we remember what kind of player he was coming out of Ohio State, he was the number 2 rookie ranked in this draft class for us at the wide receiver position, only behind Drake London, who you have to draft as a top 36 wide receiver down. And with Garrett Wilson, he checks every box you want to see. This is a wide receiver that breaks out as a sophomore at a massive school and in an offense that, guys, has Chris Olave, who is the 11th overall pick, has Jameson Williams, who's a top 15 pick as well, who has Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's going to be the wide receiver 1 in the 2023 class and looks like the next Jamar Chase. In that offense that had 4 of the premier NFL wide receivers in college, Garrett Wilson accounted for almost 35% of this team's receiving yards on a per game basis as a sophomore. That's elite. He shows his athleticism at the combine. He gets drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft. He checks every box you were looking for. So despite this being a bad situation, if we're talking about guys that you're picking up at the very end of your roster, I'm taking Garrett Wilson. I have him ranked as our wide receiver 41 in our draft guide. If we head over to Underdog Fantasy, you're going to see that he currently has an ADP sitting there right at wide receiver 52. Go take advantage. And of course, if you want to get our draft guide, if you want to go draft Garrett Wilson on Underdog Fantasy, go to the link in the live chat, go to the link in the comment section, description. You can find it anywhere. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football rankings. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football draft guide, and you'll be able to have some fun in drafts with us. But let's go down to our next wide receiver, and this is going to be dependent on the league settings that you have. Let's look at Michael Gallup here. Now with Michael Gallup, this is someone that as of today is being drafted as the wide receiver 60, but he's been falling down draft boards. Like Michael Gallup, given the fact that he's not participating in training camp, given the fact that he's still rehabbing from his injury, people are just going, okay, I'm not going to be able to start him week 1. Why the hell am I going to go ahead and draft him? Despite this situation in Dallas, setting up perfectly for Gallup. You have Amari Cooper gone, Cedric Wilson gone, James Washington injured. Right now, Michael Gallup's top target competition is CeeDee Lamb and a senior coming out of South Alabama. Like, you do not need to worry about Jalen Tolbert. Here, Michael Gallup will be the wide receiver 2 in Dallas this upcoming season. And if we're going to go through and project this out, with that wide receiver 2 role, we've seen Gallup be hyper-productive. Back in his second season in his NFL career, before CeeDee Lamb joined this team, Michael Gallup was the team leader in targets per game and receiving yards per game over Amari Cooper. This is an offense that's going to push the pace of play, going to be possibly the number 1 offense in the NFL in plays run per game, as well as a team that's going to have a very high passing rate over expectation. So I'm drafting Gallup everywhere I can if you are going to be able to put him on the IR at the very beginning of the season. If your league rules say if Michael Gallup goes on the PUP, you'll be able to put him on the IR. You'll be able to bring him back in week 5, week 6, whenever he's finally healthy. Draft Gallup. However, if you would have to burn a roster spot on your bench through the first month of the season and you're not going to have access to waiver wire pickups, there don't draft Gallup. So it's definitely going to come down to your overall league settings. Please understand the nuances of your league and how that's going to affect your draft strategy. Now, going to our third guy, this is a player that nobody likes anymore. Everybody's off of him. He's the wide receiver 63, but Christian Watson. Now, with Christian Watson, we can safely project that he is going to have some of the most efficient quarterback play in the entire NFL with Aaron Rodgers. And I already know what you're telling me in the live chat right now, what you're telling me in the comment section. Mason, Romeo Dubs is the guy. Mason, Christian Watson is not going to be the starter this year. He's been missing training camp. Yeah, he's been missing training camp. That's why you're going to get him for free in your fantasy football draft. And this is an option that is an elite level athlete, was dominant his final season in college, was drafted inside the top 40 picks of the NFL draft. He has the most invested into him among any Green Bay Packers wide receiver on this depth chart. And you're going to get him about 50, 60 picks behind Allen Lazard because everybody and their mom is 100% certain that Lazard's the wide receiver 1 in this offense, despite Allen Lazard not being impressive in any mark outside of his touchdown rate over the past 3 seasons. I am betting on Christian Watson. And hell, if it's a bad bet, who the hell cares? You drafted him as the wide receiver 63. You took him in the last round. Go through and drop him and just pick up the hot waiver wire pickup if he doesn't work through the first 3 weeks of the season. Now, our next guy is going to be a little bit more expensive, but he is going to play in a dynamic offense. He's going to play in an offense that I think could be the top scoring team this upcoming season. You got Tyler Boyd here. With Tyler Boyd, currently the wide receiver 51 in fantasy drafts, and he's being drafted, in my opinion, at his floor. Because if we go through and just look at Tyler Boyd in our draft guide, Tyler Boyd last season, wide receiver 40. The year before that, wide receiver 32. The year before that, wide receiver 26. So over the past 3 seasons, Tyler Boyd has averaged a 20% team target share in Cincinnati. He's averaged the wide receiver 32 finish overall. And what I want to specifically focus in on is not only is Tyler Boyd being drafted at his floor in this offense, because the targets are so concentrated and they use nobody outside of the trio of receivers with Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Like if we look at that trio this past year, they had 332 targets compared to all other wide receivers at 27. That is going to make Tyler Boyd a very safe option, but imagine the contingency value that you would have if there were to be an injury to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. We're not rooting for it. We're 100% not rooting for it. Please stay healthy, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You make football more fun. But if an injury were to occur to one of those 2 players through the first month of the season, you took Tyler Boyd in the last round, and all of a sudden Tyler Boyd's a top 24 wide receiver on a points per game basis, almost guaranteed with the quarterback play that we've seen from Joe Burrow as of late. Now, our next wide receiver is going to be someone that honestly is probably a little bit more appealing for very deep formats. Like if you're playing on Underdog, where obviously those deep receivers are going to matter a ton for you, I really like the idea of going through and picking up George Pickens. Now with George Pickens, he's been crushing training camp. And right now, he's listed as a starter on the Pittsburgh Steelers depth chart. Now, I don't think that matters. I don't think these depth charts matter that much in August. But what I will say is he has the same level of team investment that Chase Claypool does. Chase Claypool wasn't necessarily that impressive last season. And if we're looking at George Pickens, he broke out at 18 years old at Georgia in the SEC. He was Georgia's number 1 wide receiver. Having that breakout age, also declaring early for the NFL draft, having the prototypical size at the wide receiver position we're looking for, all these are massive boxes in favor of George Pickens. So what I think you do with Pickens here is I think you pick him up, draft him in the last round of your draft, and if Chase Claypool is playing over him, clearly, and George Pickens is only getting 30-40% of the snaps when the season starts, say, through the first 2-3 weeks. Then you go through, you just cut George Pickens. Hopefully you can pick him back up if he breaks out later on in the season. But if he goes out there, if he's playing over Claypool, which is not likely, I have Claypool ranked before him, but it is in the range of outcomes. This is a wide receiver that, based on his talent profile, does have a ton of upside. I will admit, though, the video of him getting drafted in the NFL draft is about the funniest thing you'll ever see. But now let's go through. Let's look at our next wide receiver. This will also be a deeper shout out for those deep leagues, a 14-team league, a 16-team league. Maybe you're playing on underdog and you have to draft 18 rounds. You know we got to talk about our guy, KJ Hamler. I mean, with KJ Hamler, this was someone that I was rooting for last year, and then all of a sudden we got to the preseason. We thought we were having the breakout. Remember, we got to the preseason, then KJ Hamler had beautiful long receptions going for touchdowns. And I'm sitting here looking at all my drafts that I took KJ Hamler in the 18th round and going, oh my gosh, guys, y'all are fools. Y'all are idiots. How'd y'all let me get this much KJ Hamler? Then he gets injured. Then he's out for the season. But with Hamler, he was a great prospect coming out of Penn State. He was drafted in the same draft as Jerry Jeudy. KJ Hamler was taken in the second round directly behind Jerry Jeudy, and he was the youngest wide receiver in that year's NFL draft. And now KJ Hamler should be stepping up into an every down role in a Russell Wilson-led offense. And I know a lot of people want to say, oh, Jerry Jeudy's Tyler Lockett, Cortland Sutton's DK Metcalf, just because they can look at the size of the wide receivers, and it's very easy to see that. But if you actually dive in to the playing styles of these guys, I mean, KJ Hamler looks a lot like Tyler Lockett. KJ Hamler looks like a very exciting option. So this is going to be for those super deep formats. Like right now, if I head over to Underdog Fantasy, where Hamler is getting drafted in every single one of these, he's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 69, wide receiver 70. Probably by the time this video is out, he's down there at the wide receiver 71 because Romeo Doubs will be drafted over him. But I love the long shot on Hamler. Imagine if something were to occur to Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, and all of a sudden, KJ Hamler is a top 2 target in that Russell Wilson offense, and in my opinion, has all the talent in the world. Now, let's go to our next wide receiver, someone that we were fading hard last year in fantasy football drafts. However, this is the time to buy in. Kenny Golladay. Now, here with Golladay, last year the hype was ridiculous. It was one of the most ridiculous things I'd ever seen. But he does have a top 10 finish on his resume. If we go back and look at his last healthy season in Detroit, I believe it was 2019, you had Kenny Golladay finishing as a top 10 wide receiver on a points per game basis. Now, of course, that's with Matthew Stafford. That's not with much target competition. It also definitely put in a much better situation than what he's going to have with Daniel Jones in New York. But we can look at the contract Golladay has and we can say, okay, that pretty much guarantees him to be an every down player here, even though it is a new coaching staff. And at the same time, we can look at the fact that, hell, Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, these guys kind of look like the same player. They are shifty, dynamic options that are hyper athletic, but neither of them are going to be a prototypical X-alpha wide receiver. Neither of them are going to be playing outside, trying to win at the catch point. No, that's not their game. I love the game of Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson, but they're a completely different profile of a wide receiver than what you'll have with Golladay. So maybe they cannibalize each other, and Kenny Golladay is actually just the only guy that fits that individual role that the New York Giants are looking for in this offense. So when he's being drafted right now in Underdog Fantasy, wide receiver 57, I think he fits the mold of someone that you can go out there, you can pick up. Maybe he does have a really nice role in that Brian Dable offense. We can see that through the first month of the season, and you found yourself a player with a lot of upside. But hell, I mean, if it didn't work out, if Brian Dable doesn't want to use him as that every down guy, then you just go ahead, you cut Kenny Golladay. But I think that should be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please, guys, go down there, drop that like, subscribe to the channel. We hit those 90,000 subs. It will be that party of a 24-hour live stream. And if you want to draft with us, we're drafting every single night on the live stream on Underdog Fantasy. You can find that link in the description of the video. You can find that link in the comment section. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy, make that $10 deposit. You'll be able to draft with us, draft in the public lobby, have some fun, and you'll get our 2022 rankings, our 2022 fantasy football draft guide, and a 100% deposit match up to $100. But thank you guys. I appreciate y'all. Hope you have a great day. Hope we get to see you with the live stream tonight.